I'm Grace Morgan, 29 years old. My professional life has revolved around ensuring other people's most important days unfold precisely as planned. Whether it was orchestrating product launches, lavish rooftop galas, or critical CEO town halls, I've handled every detail. Yet, absolutely nothing could have braced me for the moment my own family determined I no longer belonged in their ideal scenario. "You're not coming to the wedding." Susan's text was chillingly direct. "Selina's family doesn't want you there," Robert chimed in just a minute later, his message delivered with the detachment of an automated appointment update, rather than a declaration barring his eldest daughter from her sister's nuptials. My gaze was fixed on the display, the words stinging more acutely than I cared to acknowledge. My thumb paused above the keys for a brief period. This was a pivotal instant that would reshape everything, regardless of whether I responded or remained quiet. Deliberately, I composed my reply, ensuring its unwavering tone. "So, you chose status over blood." I observed the typing indicator dots materializing and fading on the screen, only to disappear entirely. No justification, no regret, merely an absence of communication. Understood. Their aim was an immaculate guest list, designed to impress Selina's affluent future in-laws, the Carsons. My presence was deemed undesirable. I was merely the uncredited project manager who secured their vineyard, haggled for their vendor price reductions, and personally covered thousands in deposits using my own credit card. They hadn't even offered a simple thank you, let alone extended an invitation for me to be present. Now, neither my financial contributions nor my labor would be either. I launched my laptop, accessed the venue's online portal, a system I had established under my Personal Events LLC, and, with just a few swift clicks, rescinded the reservation. I then reallocated the non-refundable down payment to an alternative event date for one of my corporate clients. Following that, I systematically addressed every contract bearing my signature, including those for catering, lighting, and transport. Upon completion, I dispatched a final message. "I hope the Carsons truly value what you gave up to earn their acceptance. Best wishes for the wedding. You'll certainly require them." What I did next completely blindsided my family. But before I recount the lengths they went to rectify the chaos I unleashed, and the events that unfolded when they eventually confronted me, share with me. What time is it for you currently, and from what location are you tuning in? I'm genuinely curious to observe how widely this minor Texas wedding catastrophe reverberates. Had you encountered our family a year ago, observing us from an external perspective, you'd likely have perceived my parents as a typical middle-class household residing in Round Rock, Texas. There was Robert, an insurance broker with a passion for golf, and Susan, a PTA matriarch utterly engrossed in social media. They had two daughters whose existences appeared flawless in carefully edited pictures. What would have remained hidden, however, was the Google Drive spreadsheet I maintained, labeled Family Favors Unpaid, or the consistent omission of my name from every public address, every online caption, and every self-congratulatory post. That particular spreadsheet originated as a jest the year I finished university. I had just secured my initial role as an assistant event coordinator at an Austin-based software firm. My employer playfully remarked that I could orchestrate mayhem in my sleep, a statement that held considerable truth. Once my parents discovered my knack for negotiating with suppliers and developing schedules, I rapidly became their de facto private logistics division. My younger sister's high school graduation celebration. Grace will handle it. Her college relocation. Grace will drive the U-Haul. A surprise engagement party. Grace will reserve the rooftop bar, the photographer, and the dessert station, and somehow cover the deposits because we'll reimburse you when our finances are less strained. They never fulfilled that promise. As my professional path advanced, I transitioned to a corporate events manager position at a cybersecurity company, where I organized conferences with budgets reaching into the seven figures. Meanwhile, my sister's existence transformed into a curated collection of achievements. When Selina received a local, Rising Nurse of the Year accolade, I personally edited the video montage displayed on the ballroom screens. During the gala, Mom shared an Instagram post with the caption, "So proud of our brilliant girl and her hard work." The video garnered hundreds of likes. Later that evening, I received a text. "You didn't include the specific song I wanted, but it ended up being fine." The announcement of Selena's engagement to Daniel Carson, a hospital administrator whose parents served on local nonprofit boards and contributed to the symphony, didn't arrive via a direct message or call. Instead, my phone buzzed with notifications from tags. I discovered the news through a reshared TikTok video of the downtown Austin proposal, complete with fairy lights and a paid violinist. Yet in the faintly visible background, directly beside the hired photographer, stood my personal tripod. Weeks prior, Mom had called. "Could you lend your gear? It's just sitting idle anyway." I had shipped her my backup camera, operating under the assumption I would be invited to assist, to meticulously adjust angles, to smooth any unruly strands of hair. Instead, I witnessed the proposal like any other viewer, through a digital screen, with my own photographic apparatus being operated by someone I didn't know. Nevertheless, when Selena telephoned the following day, her excitement audible through the speaker, I suppressed my emotional pain. "I want you to organize absolutely everything," she declared. "You're the sole person I rely on to ensure its flawlessness." And, heaven help me, I consented. The endeavor began with a simple Pinterest board and ultimately evolved into a comprehensive Notion workspace, encompassing budget monitoring tools, vendor directories, aesthetic mood boards, and an overarching timeline intricate enough to manage a Fortune 500 corporate summit. I utilized my professional network to secure their ideal location, a hill country vineyard renowned for being booked 18 months ahead of time. I paid the initial deposit via my events LLC to capitalize on my corporate rate. When I proposed including Dad as a co-signer on the agreement, Mom casually dismissed the idea. "Why introduce unnecessary complexity? You have it all under control, dear." That should have served as my initial warning sign. The second warning emerged during a tasting dinner with the Carsons. We were seated around an extended farm table, illuminated by Edison bulbs, as the venue presented miniature servings of braised short ribs and truffle mashed potatoes. Mrs. Carson turned to my mother, speaking in a tone just audible enough for me to catch. "It's truly thoughtful of Selena's sister to contribute. I understand event planning isn't precisely a sustained profession, but it must be quite enjoyable for the time being." It wasn't the specific words she uttered, but rather the condescending manner in which she spoke them. It implied that my whole occupation was merely an elongated pastime, something she indulged solely for her son's matrimonial event. Robert offered a nervous laugh, attempting to mitigate the awkwardness. "Grace excels with specifics. She's consistently been useful." Useful, not skilled, not effective, simply handy. The evening concluded with everyone expressing effusive praise for Selena's gown and the Carsons' commitment to enhancing certain aspects of the reception. Not a single person inquired about my comfort in covering thousands of dollars in deposits, all while earning a salary I had relentlessly strived to achieve. I rationalized my feelings, telling myself I was being overly analytical, that family dynamics were inherently complicated, and that this wedding would finally mark the occasion when they recognized me as more than just the individual who arrived first and departed last. Then, the text message arrived. "You're not coming to the wedding. Selena's family doesn't want you there." Abruptly, every unacknowledged video, every unreimbursed deposit, and every condescending remark coalesced with perfect clarity, much like a timeline fully zoomed out to reveal the complete picture. The night that message appeared, I neither screamed nor wept. I simply gazed at it until the blue light of my phone screen became indistinct, and my own weary eyes, disheveled bun, and worn conference t-shirt stared back from the reflection. "Selena's family doesn't want you there." It read as though I were merely a casual acquaintance, not the individual who had painstakingly constructed the entire event from scratch. 2 minutes later, another text arrived from Dad. It's complicated. The Carsons are extremely particular regarding how things look. We wish to avoid any friction on her significant day. Do you comprehend? I drafted countless responses, deleting each one. Ultimately, I settled on a sentence sharp enough to pierce through years of suppressed emotions. So, you chose status over blood. Receiving no reply, I opened my laptop. In that instant, a profound shift occurred. It wasn't a transition from tranquility to fury, but rather from daughter to project manager. My mind effortlessly transitioned into the familiar operational state it adopted when a keynote speaker withdrew an hour before their presentation, or when a hotel misplaced half of our reserved rooms. I accessed my wedding folder and opened the venue agreement. My name stood singularly on the initial page, designated as the client, succeeded by my LLC details, email address, and phone number. I rapidly reviewed the cancellation provision for what felt like the 100th occasion, though this time, I interpreted it with the resolve of someone who refused to be marginalized. If canceled within 14 days of the event, client forfeits initial deposit, but will not be charged remaining balance. Deposit may be transferred to a future event date at venue's discretion. The wedding was scheduled for just 10 days later. They had presumably anticipated I would silently absorb the expenses of their extravagant vision while they shared pictures meticulously excluding me. I had no intention of financing my own obliteration. I directly contacted the venue manager. "Hello, this is Grace Morgan from Bright Line Events," I stated, adopting my professional tone. "I need to cancel the Carson Baker wedding planned for the 18th and reallocate the deposit to a corporate event for one of my clients scheduled in October." A brief silence ensued. "Oh my goodness," the manager responded deliberately. "Is everything all right?" "The client situation evolved," I answered, which was entirely truthful. "The contract is solely in my name, and I prefer not to forfeit those funds." We proceeded to confirm the details: the October date, the new event title, and the revised invoice. By the conclusion of the call, the wedding deposit had been completely transferred to a cybersecurity summit I was planning for my job, a summit that would now benefit from a spectacular vineyard setting at a significantly reduced price. The caterer was next. That agreement, too, was under my LLC, part of a bundled service I had arranged after years of directing clients their way. Their head chef sounded empathetic, yet not taken aback. "Frankly, Grace, the mother gave us an odd impression during the tasting," he confessed. "What would you like to do about the deposit?" "Transfer it to the identical October date for the corporate group," I instructed. "Adjust the menu to the conference package." Then, I addressed the lighting, transportation, and string quartet. Each interaction involved either an email or a phone call. Every supplier had my payment information on record, and my signature authorized the arrangements. Once I finished, the only components still tied to the wedding were those my parents had adamantly chosen to manage personally. These were largely cosmetic details that looked appealing in photographs, but were not essential to the functional execution of an event. The Carsons had enhanced the bar service and commissioned a floral arch via one of their philanthropic connections. Good for them. Let them experience what an excellent bar entails when paired with no hot food or inadequate sound. Was this trivial? Perhaps. Was it retribution? Undeniably. More importantly, it represented me reclaiming something that had consistently been presented as a unilateral offering: my financial contributions, my labor, and my problem-solving abilities. I had provided these without expectation. Yet, they excluded me to curry favor with individuals who deemed my profession insufficiently prestigious. I settled back into my chair, the screen's luminescence glinting off my eyeglasses, and composed one final message for the family group chat. "I've withdrawn myself and my company from all wedding contracts registered under my name. I trust the Carsons will truly value what you were prepared to forfeit for their sake. Best of luck with the wedding. You're certainly going to require it." I pressed send, then placed my phone face down on the table. For the first time in a long while, the ensuing quiet didn't diminish me. It empowered me. In the days prior to the wedding, my mobile phone became a dormant explosive resting on the kitchen counter. I silenced the family group chat and immersed myself in my job, dedicating myself to a product launch rehearsal and feigning that the sole important schedule was my conference agenda. Nevertheless, amidst Zoom meetings and presentation slides, I repeatedly found my gaze drifting to the screen, anticipating the inevitable eruption. It commenced with Mom. "Grace, I just received an email from the venue inquiring about a contract transfer. What exactly is happening?" She wrote. When I failed to respond, her messages grew increasingly stern. "The caterer reports the deposit has vanished. They're insisting on full upfront payment or they will cancel. Please tell me this is merely a mix-up." Robert interjected soon after. "You cannot simply withdraw at the 11th hour. This is Selina's wedding. We'll reimburse you once everything calms down." Phrases that would have swayed me 5 years ago now had no impact. They had previously used, after things settled down concerning my college tuition repayment, an urgent loan for Selina's vehicle, and the funds I advanced for Mom's surgical deductible. I was still awaiting those payments. Selina's message resonated differently. It arrived late at 1:13 a.m., 3 nights before the wedding. "I heard you canceled the venue. Tell me that's not accurate. I know Mom and Dad spoke inappropriately, but this is my wedding, Grace. Why would you inflict this upon me?" I fixated on that message for the longest period, as the unvarnished truth was unpleasant. I desired for her to experience, for once, the sensation of being excluded from arrangements. However, vengeance wasn't the complete motivation. I responded deliberately. I reclaimed my generosity. "You were comfortable with me funding your ideal wedding, but not comfortable with my presence. That isn't an error, Selina. That's a conscious decision." The typing indicator dots flickered on and off for almost a full minute before her response appeared. "You're overreacting. You understand Mom's preoccupation with appearances. The Carsons hold specific standards. We simply needed the day to be straightforward." Straightforward, as if ostracizing your own sister to appease affluent strangers could ever be considered simple. I inverted my phone once more, allowing it to vibrate fruitlessly. The following morning, an Instagram direct message arrived from a florist with whom I occasionally collaborate. "Hey, word on the street is your sister's wedding is falling apart. Your mom attempted to book us at the last minute for full price. No contract, no deposit. Wanted to iron out the details after we completed the job." I couldn't suppress it. I laughed. Not a joyful laugh, but the involuntary kind one emits when a situation is so characteristic of your family that it borders on comedic. It wasn't that I wished for their humiliation. I simply refused to be their fallback solution this time. The day preceding the wedding, a messenger delivered a long white box to my apartment, an uncreased envelope affixed to its lid. Within lay a costly arrangement of white peonies and eucalyptus, the type of bouquet typically carried by bridesmaids in professionally styled photographs. The envelope contained a handwritten message in my mother's flowing penmanship. "Gracie, we've all uttered things in the fervor of the moment. This occasion transcends any single individual's emotions. Please, do not jeopardize your sister's future over a miscommunication. Should you be able to rectify the changes you made with the suppliers, we can discuss everything following the honeymoon. Love, Susan." A second, slimmer envelope was also present, bearing my name in my father's handwriting. It contained a personal check for precisely 1/3 of the venue's initial deposit, a sum nowhere near what I had personally invested across the entire wedding portfolio. It felt less like an expression of regret and more like a bargaining offer. Consider this a small gesture. Now mend our reputation. I stood in my kitchen, clutching both envelopes, the flowers resting on the countertop between my arms. For a fleeting instant, I envisioned the scenario where I capitulated, where I made a series of frantic phone calls, salvaged what I could, and then observed from my sofa as they uploaded sunset images tagged Carson wedding, acting as if none of this conflict had ever transpired. Then another version appeared, the one where I honored my personal commitment and ceased resolving issues for individuals who were perfectly content to disregard me. I carried the bouquet toward the garbage bin, paused, then retrieved an old mason jar, filled it with water, and placed a single stem inside. I set it on the table and discarded the remainder. "You can retain one beautiful item," I murmured to myself. "The onus for the rest of this debacle falls on them." On the morning of the wedding, I awoke earlier than necessary. I brewed coffee, launched my laptop, and accessed the event portal for the corporate summit. The October date shimmered on the display, accompanied by a small green, confirmed indicator. That deposit was not reverting to my parents' account. It was already allocated toward a future where my abilities and efforts garnered recognition. Around 10 o'clock, my phone vibrated with a screenshot from my closest friend, Tina. It depicted a Facebook post from one of Mom's PTA acquaintances. "Pray for my friend's family today. Her daughter's wedding is encountering significant vendor complications. Can't elaborate, but it's a huge mess." Below it were comments. "Didn't they reserve that opulent vineyard? I hope it isn't the Carsons. I heard they're quite exacting." My gaze remained fixed on the screen, the coffee in my hand gradually losing its warmth. They were intensely fabricating a narrative, and for the first time in my life, I was not a member of their crisis resolution team. I could have remained at home, observing the catastrophe through idealized photographs and hearsay. Instead, a composed, almost detached idea entered my thoughts. I desired to witness the outcome when I was absent, unable to mend the flaws. Not purely to revel in their misfortune, though perhaps a touch of that, but to observe the precise moment my family grasped that I no longer served as their ultimate safeguard. I dressed in dark denim, a plain top, and flat shoes. It wasn't attire suitable for a wedding guest, yet it wasn't unkempt either. It was neutral. I took my keys and drove toward the alternative venue mentioned in the PTA gossip's comments, a lakeside restaurant that occasionally rented its banquet hall for impromptu gatherings. The vineyard was no longer an option. The idealized vision had already fractured. I simply wished to observe the magnitude of its eventual collapse. The lakeside restaurant resembled every hastily arranged banquet location I had ever encountered. White table coverings clashed with harsh overhead fluorescent lights. A lopsided sign marked the entrance: "Carson Baker Wedding, Private Event." A handful of guests, clad in pastel dresses, lingered outside, preoccupied with their phones. "Is this the correct venue?" one inquired. "Quite certain," I replied. There was a change of location. Inside, employees hurried about with platters of chicken skewers and bulk-purchased dinner rolls. There was no ornate floral arch, no string quartet, no meticulously arranged lighting, just faux trees adorned with tulle and a DJ perspiring over a snarl of wires. This was the consequence of dismantling the fundamental structure of an event and attempting to hastily reconstruct it within a single week. At the opposite end of the room, Mom stood in a navy outfit, her smile as fixed as her hairspray. Robert restlessly walked, phone in hand, his face noticeably flushed. The Carsons loitered near the improvised archway, exuding palpable dissatisfaction. Guests gradually arrived, their pre-printed vineyard programs already irrelevant. Then, Selena emerged from a side entrance in her wedding dress, attended by bridesmaids carrying discordant bouquets. She appeared stunning, yet every facial muscle conveyed immense tension. The DJ is delayed, and the officiant has another service at 3. The photographers are still at the vineyard, a bridesmaid whispered urgently. She claims she'll attempt to make it. A flicker of panic crossed Selena's eyes. Susan's gaze swept across the room before locking onto me. A fleeting half-second of relief transformed swiftly into intense anger. She strode over, her heels clicking sharply on the tile. "You absolutely should not be here," she hissed. "After your actions, this is entirely inappropriate." "Calm down," I said. "I'll remain in the rear. Think of me as invisible." "We were forced to hastily secure this venue," she retorted sharply. "Do you comprehend the extent of this humiliation? The Carsons are incensed. This reflects poorly on their family." "On their family?" I countered. "You uninvited your own daughter to impress them. This reflects directly on you. Robert approached, his tie askew. "What precisely did you alter?" he demanded. The vineyard reservation is gone. The caterer insisted on full payment. The band claims there was no agreement. What did you do? I reallocated my contracts to an event where my presence is welcome, I responded. I ceased financially supporting individuals who act as if I don't exist. His jaw tightened. Do you have any conception of what this is costing us? I've maintained that spreadsheet for months, I stated. You were perfectly content with the expense when it served to present you as magnanimous. You simply preferred me out of the frame. Before he could reply, the microphone at the front emitted a piercing feedback sound. The substitute officiant announced the ceremony was commencing. Guests awkwardly settled into their chairs. Susan cast one last furious glance my way. Do not create a spectacle. This day is for your sister. I observed the ceremony from the back. There was no vineyard, no majestic oak tree, just a nondescript room where pledges of fidelity resonated against walls still bearing the faint scent of last night's seafood special. Halfway through, a server dropped a tray and a toddler wailed. The audio system faltered precisely during the vows of for better or worse. It seemed the venue itself was rebelling against the illusion. Then came the pronouncement, "You may kiss the bride." Yet the DJ proceeded to play the incorrect song for their recessional. Selena, arm in arm with Daniel, began her procession down the aisle, a practiced, automatic smile on her face. Guests applauded. Chairs scraped across the floor. Cameras flashed. Then her gaze landed on the back wall, specifically on me. She froze instantly. The music abruptly faltered. Discussion ceased mid-sentence. For the first time that day, my sister's composed facade crumbled. "Grace," she articulated. With the microphone still active, every head swiveled. "What are you doing here?" Selena's voice resonated as she demanded. "You weren't invited." I remained leaning against the wall, my heart thumping, yet my voice remained unwavering. "I noticed. I also noted my name on every contract that facilitated your initial wedding arrangements. I came to observe its outcome without my involvement." A collective stir swept through the guests. Mrs. Carson's eyes narrowed, flickering between my parents and me. "Is this the reason we're gathered in a restaurant?" she queried. The vineyard arrangements were mismanaged. Susan blanched. "We encountered a few unforeseen complications," she started. "This is hardly the appropriate moment." "This is precisely the opportune moment," I interrupted. "You are assembled here, rather than at Blue Ribbon Vineyards, for a singular reason. You judged me fit enough to finance this elaborate vision, but not suitable enough to be a mere background figure in your wedding album." Robert's posture grew rigid. "We requested your absence because we wished to avert any theatrics. And what was your response? You turned the entire occasion into a display of yourself." I let out a solitary, sardonic laugh. "Robert, everything has revolved around Selena since our childhood. I crafted her banners, revised her essays, documented every significant event, only to then occupy a seat in the second row while you publicly lauded her. When I received a promotion, you didn't even acknowledge it. When she became engaged, I meticulously constructed the dream you desired. And you ostracized me to curry favor with those who dismiss my profession as a mere pastime." I turned toward Selena. "You requested me to organize this because you trusted only me. Then you permitted Mom to message me as if I were a liability." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You know that's not what I intended," she murmured. "The Carsons uphold certain standards. Susan was apprehensive you might utter something inappropriate or appear in your work attire." The words sounded harsher spoken aloud. "You mean the attire I wear while orchestrating the very events that people like you boast about?" I inquired. I displayed the venue contract on my phone and extended it toward the Carsons' representative. "Bright Line Events LLC, that's my company. I secured the vineyard, brokered the rate, and paid the initial deposit. When I was uninvited, I invoked a specific contractual clause, legally and cleanly transferring my deposit to an upcoming corporate summit." The room fell silent. Mr. Carson scrutinized the screen, his jaw clenching. "So, we are standing in a contingency restaurant," he articulated slowly. "Because your parents led us to believe they had secured a venue they didn't control, then excluded the individual who actually held control." Susan stammered, sputtering. "We fully intended to rectify it. We simply required more time. We genuinely believed Grace would comprehend, and she overreacted. I retrieved the financial investment and effort you consistently undervalued, I stated. That's not an overreaction, that's a boundary. A man from Daniel's contingent muttered, so, you dismissed your event planner and then feigned surprise when the event faltered. A few strained chuckles escaped. Selena's shoulders slumped. I had no idea the contracts were registered in your name, she murmured. I assumed Mom and Dad had managed those details. They were terrified of forfeiting the Carsons' esteem. They argued we couldn't jeopardize a spectacle. I honestly believed you'd simply arrive later, or we'd sort it out post-event. You anticipated I would remain convenient, I asserted. Even as you eradicated me, she sobbed. So this is your retaliation. You destroyed my wedding. You are still married, I calmly observed. You have your husband. I did not dismantle your relationship. I shattered the delusion that you can treat people as mere employees and perpetually demand their allegiance. I have always been your sister, yet you consistently regarded me solely as a commodity. Today, you discover the outcome when that commodity chooses to disengage. Daniel advanced, catching both of us off guard. She's absolutely correct, he stated. I expressed my discomfort regarding how this situation was handled. Disinviting your own sister. I ought to have been more assertive. Susan, Robert, do not pretend to be taken aback. You have minimized Grace's profession from the very beginning. If this was the necessary catalyst to reveal that truth, perhaps we brought this predicament upon ourselves. My parents appeared utterly disoriented, as if the ground beneath them had suddenly disappeared. We only wished for a better life for you girls, Robert mumbled. We believed if Selena integrated into that social sphere, it would create opportunities for her. Opportunities I meticulously constructed and maintained while you deliberately omitted my name from any recognition, I countered. I drew a deep breath. I am not here to implore for a public apology. I am indifferent to the opinions of these guests regarding me. I am here to articulate this unequivocally, one single time. I am no longer willing to be the individual you only acknowledge when you have a need. I will cease to be your unseen safeguard. My voice remained steady. Selena's makeup streamed down her face, the pristine bridal image irrevocably fragmented. So, what now? She whispered. You simply abandon us. I recalled the October summit at the Vineyard, my name displayed on every operational schedule. The subsequent events are entirely within your control, I declared. You can continue to persuade yourself that I am overly dramatic, or you can confront the reality that you cast me aside to impress strangers. Regardless, I am not reverting to my previous subservient role. I moved nearer, just long enough to impart, I genuinely hope your marriage proves more resilient than your apprehension of appearing flawed. Relationships do not thrive on meticulously crafted facades. They endure through genuine respect. I have witnessed little of that from you, except when you required something. Then I turned and proceeded toward the side door. No crashing chairs, no raised voices, just a composed departure as the room murmured behind me, finally compelled to genuinely perceive the person who had consistently stood just outside their immediate focus. Outside, the reception's clamor softened to a muted thud behind the restaurant's walls. The lake gleamed under the afternoon sunlight. A pair of children, unmindful of the unfolding drama, casually skipped pebbles across the water's surface. I tightened my grip on the railing, allowing the surge of adrenaline to dissipate from my hands. My entire frame trembled, yet it felt more like an unburdening than an onset of fear. The door groaned open. You truly ignited that entire sequence of events, Tina commented, joining me at the railing. Are you doing all right? Oddly, yes, I replied. It's as if I finally articulated the portion I've consistently omitted from my personal narrative. They're inside, absolutely reeling as if it's a major public relations debacle, she observed. The Carsons pitted against the Morgans. Frankly, I'm relieved someone finally confronted them directly, I shrugged. They will endure. Humiliation isn't lethal, it merely dismantles one's pretenses. For years, "Don't embarrass us" had been their preferred tool for manipulation. Today, I discarded that tether. A few minutes later, the door reopened. I tensed myself. It was Selena. Her veil was gone. Her hair was disheveled. Mascara streaked her cheeks. For the first time all day, she resembled a human being, not a flawless image. Tina gently squeezed my arm and then slipped back inside. "If you ventured out here to strike me, I lack the stamina to evade," Selena rasped. "Physically confronting you would be simpler," I acknowledged. "Engaging in dialogue is far more demanding." She approached the railing, leaving a noticeable gap between us. "You truly caused them pain in there," she observed. "Susan and Dad." "They inflicted considerable pain upon me long before this very day," I retorted. She nodded once. "I know," she murmured softly. "I simply refused to confront it. It was more convenient to believe you relished being the one who managed every detail. If I acknowledged its unfairness, I would also have to confess to exploiting you." "I didn't object to providing assistance," I clarified. "I objected to being taken for granted and then summarily dismissed." She swallowed hard. "When Mom dispatched that text message, I understood it was improper." I knew, yet she was distraught over losing social standing. "And Dad asserted we couldn't risk offending the Carsons. I rationalized that you were resilient and we would rectify it at a later time. I left all the responsibility to later." "Occasionally, later never materializes," I noted. "That's precisely why I established a definitive boundary." She gazed at the water. "So, are you severing ties with us irrevocably?" "I don't possess an eternal strategy," I articulated. "I understand I require genuine autonomy to cultivate a life where I'm not perpetually substantiating my right to a seat at the very table I arranged. If we ever reconstruct any aspect of our relationship, it will necessitate boundaries that remain steadfast even when they prove inconvenient." Her voice lowered considerably. "Do you detest me?" It was the most candid inquiry she had posed throughout the entire day. I reflected on our formative years, the countless evenings spent on piano benches and athletic fields, all the instances where we were assigned predetermined roles. "No," I affirmed, "I do not detest you. I resent the predetermined narrative we were handed. You were designated the star performer. I was relegated to the role of stagehand. Susan and Dad favored that arrangement, and we both acquiesced." She blinked forcefully. "Then what does affection manifest as for you now?" "It manifests as individuals who offer apologies without portraying themselves as the aggrieved party," I expounded. "Parents who prioritize their children's emotional well-being over their societal standing. A sister who doesn't defer until her wedding day to ascertain if my presence is aesthetically advantageous." She emitted a short, tearful chuckle. "Daniel informed my parents he won't proceed with the honeymoon until they commit to therapy." She recounted that he actually uttered the term boundaries to Mom. I believed she might faint. I felt a slight upturn at the corners of my mouth. That was the genuine cost being exacted. Not merely a blemished aesthetic, but repercussions they were incapable of charmingly circumventing. "Excellent," I approved. "Perhaps having to articulate the unvarnished truth to an impartial professional in a tranquil setting will achieve more than 100 aesthetically pleasing photographs ever could." She inhaled deeply. If you and I were to pursue therapy, would you ever contemplate being in the same space as me again?" "Not immediately. Not next week. Simply someday." I envisioned the October summit at the Vineyard. My name emblazoned on the signage. Staff members soliciting my input on stage positioning. Not my parents. Perhaps one day I would extend an invitation for her to witness that sphere on my conditions. "Someday possesses more integrity than never," I observed. "So perhaps if the endeavor is genuine and not merely performative." She nodded, like someone in agreement with stipulated conditions. "Okay." We did not embrace. We simply stood there, two women in costly attire, contemplating a lake while a disarrayed reception continued unsteadily behind us. Several weeks later, I stood once more on that Vineyard hilltop, wearing my headset, observing a cybersecurity keynote concluding beneath the very lights I had once envisioned for Selena's inaugural dance. The venue manager smiled. "I'm truly delighted this date was assigned to your company," she conveyed. The previous couple who attempted to hastily organize something, it was quite a struggle. They lacked a grace. Yes, I confirmed. I am aware. That evening at home, my phone vibrated. A photograph arrived from Selena. It depicted her and Daniel on a sofa alongside a woman dressed in a professional blazer. The caption read, "Session 1, no excuses. Just wanted you to know we're making an effort." I gazed at the image, then composed my reply. "I'm glad. Keep going." No emojis. No commitment to visit. Pure acknowledgement. After pressing send, I accessed my notes application and inscribed, "You are absolutely entitled to distance yourself from individuals who only reach out when they require something, even if they are family, and most particularly if they are family." I often wonder what your approach would have been. Would you have rescinded the venue reservation, or would you have endured the slight and appeared regardless? At what precise moment does maintaining harmony merely signify sacrificing your own identity so that others can uphold a facade of perfection? That is the precise boundary I am currently learning to protect. However, this much I comprehend. My existence is no longer orchestrated around elevating the appearances of others while I recede into the background. And for me, that holds significantly more value than any impeccably executed wedding. Yet, I am intrigued. Where would you have established your boundary in my situation? From my vantage point, this narrative transcends mere retaliation for past conflicts. It encapsulates the precise instant a daughter finally sheds the role of an uncompensated problem solver within her own family. Grace's act of canceling the venue and reclaiming her financial investment and efforts is not about sabotaging a wedding. It is her unequivocal declaration. Family should not be founded upon disrespect and exploitation. In reality, numerous individuals are conditioned to endure every transgression for the sake of tranquility, yet the ultimate cost is their self-esteem and psychological well-being. The crucial narrative elements in this story emphasize that healthy boundaries, reciprocal respect, and the bravery to refuse unjust treatment are not unkind. They are indispensable. That in itself also constitutes a form of love, self-love, and a vital lesson many families urgently require to re-internalize.